Good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar on the ISO 27001 2022 transition roadmap with a focus on planning for the transition and the key deadlines, or now key deadline. I'm Alan Calder. I'm the Chief Executive of IT Governance, also the Chief Executive of its parent company, GRCI Group. I'm the author of a number of books on information security, on ISO 27001, on GDPR, and a whole host of other things, as well as having been involved in this industry for the last 20 odd years, working with clients in multiple areas. So as a company, IT Governance now has some 20 years worth of experience around ISO 27001 originally, and more broadly. We have more than 12,000 clients across 5 continents. Very deep expertise in our consultants, our trainers, and our subject matter expertise, and a comprehensive ISO 27001 product and service offering. We've deployed that widely. We've helped more than 1,300 organizations to prepare and maintain their ISO 27001 compliance. We've had well over 15,000 people go through our ISO training courses for various internationally recognized qualifications. We've issued 7,000 Cyber Essentials certificates, and we have well over 2,000 customers using our governance, risk, and compliance software. And we have multiple accreditations, all of which indicate that what we do meets the standards that you would expect us to meet, because those are the standards required across the industry in terms of information security, privacy, and so on. But we do more than that. We deliver services to a very high standard. We're known for our service quality and customer service. Our Net Promoter Score is currently sitting at 63. That's approaching world class. Our Trustpilot score for everything which people buy through our websites is sitting in the excellent area. So, it's a key focus for us, and something that we go on working at to make sure that we have customers satisfied by the quality of what we do to help them deal with the challenges in and around ISO 27001 and everything else in the world of information security. I'm joined today, I hope, by Tom Wheat. Tom, are you with us? We feared he might not be, so if he does get here, I'll give him a couple of slides to talk about. But Tom is International Sales Manager at Perry Johnson Registrars. They're an American and European certification body for ISO standards. He's had some 12 years of consulting experience. He's a lead auditor across a multiple set of standards, and his focus at Perry Johnson is customer service. And the main reason I mentioned Perry Johnson is because there is a good practical working relationship between IT Governance and Perry Johnson. It's not a formal relationship in the sense that Perry Johnson is an independent certification body. It has to be. We like to be able to work with all certification bodies, but nevertheless, we have a good understanding with Perry Johnson about what they expect to see in organizations coming forward for ISO 27001 certification. They have a good understanding of how we prepare clients for it, which means that where we help clients prepare for ISO 27001 certification, and Perry Johnson is then their independent certification body. The guarantee that we give clients that they are certain to pass is even more likely to turn out to be the case. So it's a good working relationship. It's particularly a US focused relationship, or was originally a US focused relationship, but Perry Johnson is now has offices in the UK and in the EU and can provide certification services across the whole of the globe. Today's agenda is the key changes introduced by 27001, the impact of 27001 on organizations planning to implement it, some strategies for how to make the transition, a look at the planning and deadline management to ensure a smooth transition, and then a touch on the Cyber Comply platform and how that can help organizations transition and reduce costs fairly substantially. You will have noticed that you are on mute. That's how we try and avoid too much background noise disturbing the webinar. You may find that you have questions that you want to have answered as I go through the webinar, which is fine. In the GoToWebinar panel in front of you, you will see that there is a questions section. Please do click on that. You can type questions into that as and when it occurs to you. And then when we come to the end of the presentation. It's about 40 minutes or so, 35 or 40 minutes of me talking through the prepared slides. I'll then stop and take whatever questions you've presented. I'll share the question with the audience and then answer it to the best of my ability. So do, if you have questions, don't ignore them. Do, as they strike you, put them into the questions section on GoToWebinar there. So, moving first into the key changes introduced by ISO 27001-2022 and their implications. And the context is, of course, that the standard which many organizations are still complying with is ISO 27001-2013. That's almost a decade ago the standard was introduced. The updated version was published on the 25th of October 2022, much needed. The biggest changes are not so much in the management standard itself in clauses 4 through 10, but in the control set in Annex A. And Annex A, as you probably know, is simply the list of controls which are which are explained in more detail in ISO 27002-2022. And all of the changes in 27002 really do reflect significant changes in the way organizations manage information security, and therefore become an even more useful referent control set for organizations dealing with information security. So that's the kind of context for what we're talking about. A brief look at the changes in the management standard itself. So in terms of context and scope, that's clause 4. The requirement is to identify the relevant requirements of interested parties and identify or determine which will be addressed through the ISMS. So it's not just the requirements, because of course requirements could be much more substantial than simply related to information security. It's saying focus very specifically on the information security, privacy, etc. related requirements of interested parties, and address them and also include processes that are needed to operate the ISMS and their interactions with what's in the scope of the ISMS. Information security objectives must now be monitored and made available as documented information. As you know, the requirements as to what has to be documented is relatively slim. Information security objectives now one of them. You can do that by identifying them in the information security policy. You could have a separate document, but they must be very clearly set out. And like all good objectives, you're going to set them with a long-term horizon in mind, and they're going to tie sensibly into the objectives of the organization itself. There's a new subclause in ISO 27001 clause 6 dealing with the requirement to plan changes to the ISMS. That's sensible, but particularly it applies to the transition. So if you're going to comply with 27001-2022, you need to go through the steps of demonstrating that you've planned to make the transition. Otherwise, it's a kind of instant non-conformity, and the planning would be a gap analysis, identifying the things that need to change, putting a change plan in place, and then making the changes. Some changes around the the support clauses, the requirement to define who will communicate, and the processes for effecting communication have been replaced by a general requirement to simply define how to communicate. So again, it recognizes different organizations have many different approaches. It just needs to be clear in the ISMS that you have set out how you will communicate those things which need to be communicated in the context of the ISMS. So that's both management requirements, its objectives, it is the way in which information security awareness is promulgated, it's the way in which you deal with cyber incidents. All of those are different areas that you might need to deal with communication. In terms of the operation clauses, so that's clause 8, establish criteria for process to implement actions that were identified in clause 6. Clause 6 is what really identifies your risks through the risk assessment. And the specific requirement is that you control externally provided processes, products, or services that are relevant to the ISMS rather than just processes. So there may be products or services that you buy in which are important to your ISMS. So you might, for instance, buy anti-malware software. That's a service that's coming in. It's externally provided service. You might be buying SOC security operations center services, you want to think about them, they're externally provided services. So identify them and control them, work out what controls you have to put in place in the context of what risks there might be that you need to deal with. Finally, in clauses 9 and 10, there's added emphasis that the method to monitor, measure, analyze, and evaluate the effectiveness of the ISMS should produce comparable and reproducible results. And you probably remember those words from the risk assessment. The risk assessment is also required to produce comparable and reproducible results. So logically, the way you're measuring the effectiveness of controls should meet the same logical criteria. And finally, in management review, you should be considering changes in the needs and expectations of interested parties, and that's obviously stakeholders, but also changes in the law, changes in regulation. They all need to be dealt with through management review because that can feed into changes elsewhere in the management system. So that's the notable changes in clauses 4 through 10. It's not structurally different from what it was. It still follows the core ISO management standard. But the biggest changes are in Annex A. So Annex A now lists 93 controls. 2013 had 114, and those 93 controls are now organized into 4 themes rather than into 14 clauses. And those 4 themes are organizational, technology, physical, and people, and they reflect the reality that you need to be able to think about, and the competent and responsible people need to be able to think about the controls that apply specifically in their area. So are we talking about governance, risk management, compliance, in which case probably you're looking at the organizational controls. If you're looking at how you manage risk in technology, then you're looking at the technology controls and so on. There are a number of completely new controls. I've listed them there on the screen for you. Some of them are kind of obvious. ICT readiness for business continuity, for instance, the logic of dealing with data leak prevention, data masking ties it much better into GDPR and other privacy regulation, secure coding, information security for use of cloud services. All of those additional controls recognize the reality of the way in which the technology environment has changed over the course of the last 10 years, and so there are appropriate additional controls to think about. Remember, Annex A is a referent control set. It's not a obligatory control set. You don't have to have all of the controls, but if they are relevant, you need to select them. If you don't select them, you're simply going to say in your statement of applicability, no, and provide the reason why not. But ISO 27002 goes further than that. For each of the controls, it now identifies an attribute. And the attribute is designed to make it, again, easier for you to determine how to use controls. So the 5 types of attribute are firstly the control type. Is it preventive, detective, or corrective in terms of how you would deploy it? Are you preventing a risk from occurring? Are you detecting it before or as it occurs, or are you correcting it afterwards? What are the properties that it's dealing with? Is it dealing with confidentiality, integrity, availability, or a mix of those? Which concepts is it addressing? Is it the identify, protect, detect, respond, recover? Which stages in that cyber defense in-depth model? Which capabilities are effective? Is it the governance capability, the asset management capability? And then finally, which domains, which security domains are you dealing with? Governance and the ecosystem, protection, defense, etc. So all of those are useful. Again, remember ISO 27002 is a guidance document, so none of them are obligatory, but thinking about how you use them to better determine the controls that you're going to apply in your management system is a sensible thing to do. So I would say getting familiar with 27002 early on in your transition process is a sensible step to take. The transition in controls is made relatively easy for you because ISO 27002 publishes a series of annexes which crosswalk or cross-map the controls, so that you can see in table B2, for instance, it goes 2013 control identifier 5.1. It tells you what the identifier is in 27002 2022. So you can very easily, when you're looking at transitioning your statement of applicability, see which controls you're going to transition to from your existing controls. Of course, you'll see some gaps in ISO 27002. You'll have to work through what those are, but where there is a transition, this table tells you exactly what they are, which makes it really helpful. So get familiar with that. Thirdly, it's worthwhile getting aware of or being aware of the changes to ISO 27005. ISO 27005 has been updated. There's a process of updating all of the 27,000 standards going on. 27,005 2022 is relevant, A, because it's been obviously matched to 27,001 2022, and it's very specifically therefore focusing on the implementation of information security risk requirements as specified in 27001. It doesn't mandate a specific approach to risk assessment. It cannot be audited against. It is a guidance document. But if you are using it, and many organizations do simply because it's a 27,000 family document, it's a very practical and straightforward approach to risk assessment. It's worth having read the standard, being aware of what is in it, because it's a logical component of being on top of ISO 27001 2022. So how do these changes impact your role? It's kind of worthwhile just being aware of what the requirements set out for organizations were. So the requirement for certification bodies is that the certification audit body has to establish its transition arrangement for 27001 2022, has to address what the CAB will do and what the client will do, can publish all of those changes, but effectively the transition arrangement should at least include what the transition to ISO 27001 2022 requires, what the gap analysis might look like, and therefore the transition audit which can be carried out obviously as part of a recertification audit, as part of a surveillance visit, or as a separate audit. Any of those are possible depending on the commercial discussion you have with your CB, and most CBs are looking at doing this either as a recertification audit, so when your recertification comes around, or as part of a surveillance visit. The requirements for the audit are very straightforward. What's the gap analysis? What are the need for changes? So as I said, 27001 2022 says plan the changes. So your transition audit starts with a gap analysis. How has the statement of applicability been updated? Has the risk treatment plan been updated? And logically, if there are changes to the SOA, there will be changes to the risk treatment plan. And how have the new controls been implemented, and how are they, what kind of measures of effectiveness are in place or will be in place to measure that? If the CAB is satisfied that they can meet their own objectives in terms of auditing the transition, that can be done remotely. It does not have to be an on-site audit. So those are the requirements. So thinking about how you manage the transition, you need to think about in those requirements, in the context of those requirements. From your point of view, yes, you need to upgrade your own competence certificate. So if you have a lead implementer or lead auditor certificate for ISO 27001 2013, you need to transition that. It needs to become a 2022 certificate. You need to do a transition course, or you don't need to do a transition course, you at least need to do the transition exam, which will require you to demonstrate your existing certification. You can then do an exam which demonstrates that you understand the new requirements, and that will then get you an up-to-date certificate. Remember, requirements in terms of competence is that you need to be able to demonstrate that you have the competence. So don't have a 2013 certificate for lead audit or lead implementer. That's a kind of obvious non-conformance. So update your own competences, understand 27002, understand the limited changes in 27001, and understand what the transition process needs to look like. So let's talk now a little bit about the process for transition. What are the kind of key areas to look at? So from a timing point of view, the logical point was always that there was no point in rushing, because as soon as 2022 standard became available, certification bodies still had to get them sorted out. 27001 2013 is not retired until the point by which you can only certify, until the point at which 2022 is the required standard, and that is 3 years from the date on which 27001 2022 is published. So you have until October 2025. So 2013 is valid up till that point, but if you haven't transitioned by then, you automatically will no longer be compliant. Annex A controls are not mandatory. It's a referent control set. You adopt the new controls if you have a risk for which they're appropriate. And so you will certainly need to adapt your SOA so it has the Annex A 2022 controls listed on it. Even if you're only mapping to 2013 controls, your Annex A will still need to be the basic set of controls as contained in 2022. So that's the first set of things to think about. The second is assuming that you're already certified to 27001 2013, the 3-year transition period is underway. We're more than halfway through it. You can transition earlier if you can get yourself ready. There are many benefits to being ready, and then you're simply in surveillance audits thereafter. Look at transitioning at your next surveillance visit, but you need to have prepared for it. And part of the logical way of preparing for that is, in a sense, you just simply do your internal audit prior to that against 2022. That identifies a set of gaps. That's your gap analysis that leads into changes to your statement of applicability and your risk treatment plan. So sensible to transition in advance. Don't wait until October 2025 to make the transition, because there are 60-odd thousand companies with the 27001 2013 certificate. And in the normal scheme of things, most organizations wait, which means that it will be impossible to get a certification visit booked for the last 6 months or so prior to the end of October 2025. So don't wait. Get on with it now. You are, we are now probably 18 months away from the point by when you have to transition. So I would encourage people to think about making your transition before the end of calendar 24. Much easier to implement the new control set because they're identifiable by attributes, so much easier to tie them into compliance obligations to the requirements of interested parties. And remember that you've got to update all of the supporting documentation as you're putting together your plan. So your transition plan shouldn't just look at changes to the statement of applicability and risk treatment plan. It should look at what are the competences of the individuals inside the management system, what is the documentation, the risk assessment, all of those things. How do you update all of those so that they are in line with the requirements of 2022? A lot of benefits to making the 2022 transition. You win new business. Customers are going to go, okay, you're obviously on top of this. There are financial penalties and losses that come from non-compliance. 2022 control set enables you to tie your controls much more closely into regulatory control sets. You get reputational benefits out of that. You can easily demonstrate how well you comply with legal, contractual, and regulatory requirements. For many organizations who have to also demonstrate compliance with, for instance, SB 853, the categorization in controls makes it much easier to crosswalk from 27001 and your 27001 environment to the requirements of NIST and other regulatory frameworks. And that can make your life a lot simpler when you're dealing with multiple compliance requirements from multiple different customers. Making the transition can make your life easier in terms of audits from third parties. And the fact that you can demonstrate an audit opinion against your current compliance against a current standard is a very strong point for most organizations. So strategies, let's think just a little bit about strategies that are logical for organizations making the transition. So if you know ISO 27001, you'll know the structure. There are 10 clauses. Clauses 1 through 3 are the scope of the standard, normative references, terms and definitions. Terms and definitions are consistent across the whole ISO 27000 family. They're usually all captured in ISO 27000, but there might be some specific definitions in clause 3. But the clauses you have to comply with are clauses 4 through 10. So clause 4 is the set of requirements around regulatory and business context. What do customers and regulators require from us? What's the scope of the management system? Clause 5 looks at how the management will support the management system, what its commitment is, how it's providing leadership. Clause 6 is really the risk assessment. So, ISO 27005 fits in to there. 7 is about resources, people, infrastructure. Many of the people controls will tie into the clause 7 requirements of the ISMS. Clause 8 is about the implementation of the identified controls. Many of the other controls in both the organizational and technological sets of controls will also affect how you execute and rolling out the controls, making sure they're working effectively. And then 9 and 10 are the monitoring, corrective action, and continual improvement requirements. So the management system clauses, they basically haven't changed. I touched earlier on the kind of areas in which there are at a detail level changes, but that's your ISMS. And so the key things that you want to be able to demonstrate come your transition audits are the obvious ones. They come from the management standard. Is there a budget for the transition? Is there a project team that is going to handle the transition? Where is the gap analysis that identifies what needs updating? How have we identified relevant external processes? What's the link between how we do risk assessment, how we choose controls, what the compliance relationship is? How have we allocated tasks, responsibilities, and timelines? And have you improved your compliance posture as a result of doing this? This is a logical time to be thinking about including ISO 27701, that's the PIMS, Personal Information Management System standard, or 17 or 18, which are both, which are either cybersecurity controls or personal information in the cloud controls, thinking about including them in your ISO 27001 scope. Those are standards which add some controls to Annex A, but you can't get certification on a standalone basis to them. You can only do that as part of your ISO 27001 certification. So it's a logical time to think about doing it, because then you have a certification audit to 27001 2022, which includes one or more additional standards which improve your overall risk posture. Communication plan, updating skills, competences, staff awareness. Why are we changing? Have risk owners review risks and controls in the light of 27002. Make sure all the elements are in place to fully transition. Deploy the amended processes and procedures, preferably long before the visit from your conformity assessment body or certification body. And if you can, you should complete a round of internal audits and conduct a management review, all of which demonstrates the management system is working exactly as it should be. In terms of the risk assessment, as you know, risk assessments are a critical element in ISO 27001. They're a critical element in the transition as well. They help identify and prioritize information security risks, and many organizations, sadly, in the period of certification will not return to and revisit their information security risk assessment. They'll kind of go, no, nothing much has changed. This is a good opportunity to review it and make sure it's up to date. You certainly have to review link between selected controls and risks, so this is a good time to make sure that your asset inventory is correct, that the controls you've identified are appropriate for the risks. So review your risk assessment methodology. Does it align with 27005? Is there new best practice that you should be including in it? Have you got an up-to-date inventory that identifies the valuable assets for the organization? You've got a criticality or value assigned to them. Threats and vulnerabilities, are you up to date? Remember, vulnerabilities and threats both have changed very significantly over the last 2 or 3 years, so simply going, nothing's changed, not a good place to be. Review likelihood and impact. That drives into your risk evaluation and therefore into your control selection. You obviously want ongoing management support. If you're an existing ISO 27001 company, you already have some management support. You need to make sure it's reinvigorated, make sure that they understand the benefits and business value of your 2022 certification. Communicate the risks of non-compliance. Remember, the last 2, 3, 4 years, regulatory requirements around information security and privacy have become much more significant. The fines and damages are much more painful. Evidence of industry best practice, build that into what you're doing. Make sure that you emphasize the role of senior management through the organization in driving a security-focused culture, and look increasingly at how the organization can competitively benefit from its up-to-date 2022 certification. Whether now or in the long run, preferably now, you need to be making sure that your continual improvement elements are in there. Continual improvement gets to be more and more a focus of certification bodies, because how the management system goes about delivering on the information security objectives is fundamentally about continual improvement. So the plan, do, check, act cycle, continually reviewing your risk assessment, making sure that you have employees at all levels contributing to improving the ISMS, their insights and feedback, uncovering vulnerabilities and driving innovative solutions. And above all, learning from incidents, making sure that people are reporting information security incidents and that as a business, you are effectively learning from them. All important parts of driving continual improvement. So summarizing why the organization should be getting on with doing this. Don't simply go, oh, it's a pain in the neck, let's give it a drop. Continually test and review risks. Risks are changing. You need to be on top of those. Keep your documentation up to date. It can get out of date over time. That means that you have people going, I don't know what I'm meant to do here, and then they do the wrong thing, which exposes you, enables you to protect and enhance your reputation, keep senior management aware of and involved in managing risk. The regular management review process is very good for making sure that you continue to have the right level of budget allocation, the right level of focus on cybersecurity, not too much, not too little. You're on top of corrective actions, and your ongoing staff security awareness is critical because of the extent to which social engineering is the key vector of attack for cyber criminals or e-criminals today. Think about putting the ISMS on a platform to automate and simplify maintenance. ISMS platforms, cybersecurity, cyber compliance platforms can take big chunks of time out of the activity of an information security manager or compliance manager in terms of the day-to-day updating and managing of information security and information security risks. So just summarizing where we are in terms of thinking about the formal change timetable, October 2025, 36 months from the last day of publication, month of 27001 2022, published in October 2022, so you have until October, the end of October 2025. That's the date. There's the formal timetable. That's not me saying it. That is the internationally agreed process for certification, so it applies all over the world. We have until October, end of October 2025 to recertify. So the best practices are exactly as I've said: secure management support, develop a project plan, have a gap analysis, engage everybody through the organization, update the policy and procedure documentation, make sure that the risk assessment has been updated, and then deploy the controls and get on with continually improving them. Try not to be doing this in the weeks before your reassessment, because it'll be very difficult to demonstrate that the management system is mature, that it's operating in a stable way, and that continual improvement is in place. Best practice: get all of this done well before your recertification visit. But those are the steps that you want to go through. Those are the steps that want to be in your transition plan. Compliance with the mandatory requirements of 27001, number one. Compliance with applicable legal, regulatory, and contractual security-related obligations. So the updating of those, the recognition of what those requirements are, what we call the building blocks of a cybersecurity framework, the requirements that are driven by the law, by regulation, by business contract. They're not driven by risk assessment, they're driven by you have to have them, and then complying with your own policies and procedures within the ISMS. All the key elements of building consistent and full compliance across the organization, with your controls applied all the time, everywhere that's in scope and working effectively. And that means that continual improvement in the ISMS will deliver on your information security objectives. And you remember I mentioned that information security objectives must be clearly identified, and the way in which you measure control effectiveness should link to the control objectives and how you are going about achieving those. The three elements that help you do that are internal audits, obviously, management reviews, the formal review of the input in terms of internal audits of all of the data that you gather about control effectiveness, and of course external auditors. Don't think of your external auditors simply as somebody who comes along and ticks the boxes and you have another certificate. Think of them as external evaluators of the effectiveness of your management system. So I kind of tend to think that if your external auditors aren't finding some opportunities for improvement, they're not trying hard, you're not getting real value from them. It's, of course, you want to have no non-conformities, but what you want to have is input from an external source. Your external auditors don't know your management system. They will give you an unbiased, unvarnished view, which is really valuable in terms of continually driving improvements. And your continual improvement log should include input from all of those sources. You shouldn't treat requirements from things identified by the external auditors separately from what you identify internally. They're all part of how you drive internal improvement. I just want to move the conversation on slightly more broadly now, because in dealing with cybersecurity today, you have to think beyond the tech stack. You can't, and ISO 27001 recognizes this, you can't become cybersecure, you can't be an organization with effective information security management system if you're only trying to do this through technology. You have to manage security in terms of people, process, and technology. And of course, 27002's attributes help you do that, but you need to have a management system which enables you to address all of that. There are many organizations who still think of information security as being simply about technology. It isn't. It is about dealing with risk to information and to information systems across the whole of the organization. Building cyber defense in depth is another way to think of what ISO 27001 enables you to do. So when you're talking to management and people inside the organization, it's not just about we get a certificate, the certificate's good for us. You can talk to them about actually the certificate enables us to genuinely build cyber defense in depth. As we become more resilient, as we're able to handle cyber and privacy risks, which are really just different sides of the same coin, we become a better business to be working within. And the mix of confidentiality, integrity, and availability on which our management system built really is a critical part of how, as an organization, we are competitive and effective in today's world. CyberComply is the key platform that can help you do all of that. So when I mentioned earlier on that looking at a platform to automate ISO 27001, so all of the customers who use CyberComply, for instance, in terms of doing their update, there's nothing they needed to do because automatically fed into all of their documentation are the changes that 27001 2022 brings. The statement of applicability gets updated following an updated risk assessment. The risk treatment plan, all of the cross-mapping is just done automatically. So a compliance platform can make life easy. CyberComply is a platform which goes beyond simply ISO 27001 and recognizes the wide number of standards and frameworks which work together for different organizations in different regions to help them manage a complicated mix of contractual, regulatory, and business requirements, and which delivers not only an integrated set of documentation and functionality, but also delivers a set of related services where you need services that enable you to better implement, better understand, better deploy, better manage your cybersecurity environment, recognizing that ISO 27001 is really the underpinning standard that supports virtually every other regulation and law in the space, because that core CI&A, the mapping in ISO 27002, enables you to take a single standard and use that to build a single integrated management system that you can use to demonstrate compliance to multiple other sets of requirements. So have a look at CyberComply. It's an integrated platform that provides a series of benefits. It's a comprehensive set of best practices and standards that enables you to treat data security risks before they become concerns, deals with key data processing risks, reduces errors. All of those enable you to get started quickly. It's not a complicated platform to deal with. You get on-demand, unlimited support. You can live chat with the product team. It's got task-based landing page. You can issue and run tasks from inside the management system. There's a whole roadmap of additional functionality coming, which will include an audit manager, which enables you to have audits done live in the platform with the audit results fed into dashboards. So more cost-effective, much quicker, more straightforward. So automation is the key thing that CyberComply delivers to you. What I would say is do click on this link when you get the slides. The slides will be distributed after the webinar. You will be able to deal with all of the functionality that CyberComply makes possible. It's not just a huge range of products, of standards and frameworks, but functionality to do risk assessments, to manage incidents, to manage GDPR compliance, to manage tasks and notifications inside the organization, manage audits, all of those components that enable you to streamline and automate what you're doing in terms of cybersecurity. And there is, because of the CyberComply offer, a price point which lasts until the 31st of March. You get everything in CyberComply, all features, all the future roadmap, all at one price. The detail is on the screen. It'll be in the slides when they are distributed to you. And customers think a lot of the framework. So one customer said that it saved them between 40 and 80,000 pounds worth of additional costs they would have to make in implementing ISO 27001, speeded up their information security processes by 75%. You can see some of the brands that use CyberComply. So it's a platform, it's a cloud-based platform that is worth looking at in terms of transitioning. And if you're transitioning, yes, there's some work required to get your management system onto a platform. The logical time to do it is when you're going through the changes that an ISO 27001 transition might cause. So don't risk it. CyberComply is the key call to customers. So CyberComply is a simple platform. There are a number of other ways in which IT governance can help and does help its organizations get themselves through the transition loop, whether it is through helping you put together a transition plan, helping you execute it, providing you with training, assessing controls, doing internal audits. We can help you anywhere on that journey to get ISO 27001 2022 certified. Just give us a call. We've got services where we can fast track organizations. So for those organizations who are looking to get started for the first time on ISO 27001, we have an offering which can get you very quickly to certification readiness without you having to do any of the heavy lifting. We do all of that for you, meeting your legal and regulatory contractual obligations. We call it a fast track. We have an option for small companies, fast track 20, and then a fast track 500, which is for larger organizations. And of course, a huge range of training, transition training course, lead implements training course. You can get copies of the standards on our website. So from any one of our websites, do log on, or from the standards, do log on, take a look at any of the things that we have there, which are designed simply to help you either achieve ISO 27001 for the first time, or indeed to make the transition to the 2022 version of the standard. And ladies and gentlemen, that brings me to the point at which I stopped talking for a bit. If you remember, I did say that if you had questions, you should put them into the Q&A panel in the GoToWebinar panel. What I'm going to do is I'll pick up any questions that there are there. I'll share the question with you and then give you my answer. So are we affiliated with any South African accredited certification bodies? I'm not sure which ones are accredited in South Africa, but we certainly work with all of the global certification bodies. So any members of the IAF, if it's a certification body, whether it's DNV or BSI or LRQA or obviously Perry Johnson. So any we work with, we're very happy to work with any that we haven't worked with in the past, because we've been doing this for 20 years. We like to do that. Out of 11, 10 are IT specific, and only one physical security is. I'm not sure I understand that question, I'm afraid. Out of 11, 10 are IT specific, and only one physical security is admin and IT. If you wouldn't mind repeating the question for me again, I haven't properly understood that. Upgrade audit will be of how we have implemented the new 11 controls with the statement of applicability will be how we applied 93 controls in their new form. It's the 93 controls in their new form. It's not how you've applied the controls. So the audit will look at have you changed your statement of applicability from 2013, which is the 114 controls, to 2022, which is the 4 themes of controls and the 97 odd controls. So you need to have changed your statement of applicability. It now needs to be very specifically referencing the new Annex A. And then for each of the controls in it, which you can map to your existing 2013 controls, you need to identify whether you have selected the control or not. If so, how you've implemented it, whether it's implemented or not. If you haven't, why not? So it's very specifically focused on the ISO 27001 2022 Annex A. for a new 27001 certification with a 2022 standards transition from informal environment with no existing ISMS company of 100 people. So if it's a new ISO 27001 certification, the process, funnily enough, is exactly the same. The fact you're not transitioning from an existing ISMS, you're transitioning from whatever it is that you do, and you will be managing information security. So the normal logical approach for an organization is to do, if you're doing it yourself, is to do a gap analysis and go and say, this is the requirements of 27001, which ones of those are we doing? Therefore, here's a plan for how we do it. If you have somebody like us come along and do a fast track service, typically what we'll do is a combination of a basic gap analysis and then we'll roll out the things we know that most organizations don't have as we finalize the gap analysis. But the logic is exactly the same. So whether you're transitioning from an existing certificated ISMS or just simply transitioning from something that's not certificated to something that is, broadly speaking, the process is exactly the same. Will the presentation be shared after the webinar? Yes, it will. It will go out to everybody. I believe it might already be it's in the handout, so you should be able to access it now. How long before the worthiness audit should one have controls in scope implemented in terms of the sample size of evidence? So the answer is that it's up to you, really. What the certification auditor wants to see is that you've made the transition, that you've looked at your existing controls, that you may have modified what you're collecting, and you're clear about what you're doing and how you are putting that in place. So unlike a SOC 2 audit, which is looking at a point in time, and you need to have a significant body of evidence in place to demonstrate that you've achieved something. What your ISO 27001 audit is looking at is the management system functioning? Is it working in the way that it's meant to work? Are you collecting and using the information that you should be using? So, you know, it's not unusual for an organization to go to a certification audit and it's still implementing some of the selected controls. Its risk treatment plan will say, for instance, this control is only going to be implemented in 3 months' time because we have to invest in a particular level of technology to make that happen. In the meantime, we're managing the residual risk like this. That's a perfectly normal way to go about preparing for an audit. What the auditor is looking for is your management system currently working? And you know, from a consultancy and advice point of view, we quite often find ourselves helping clients deal with those issues where they don't yet have a mature management system, but they have a client imperative which says you must get certification. So we help them prepare and present that argument to a certification auditor. Do all scope controls need to be fully implemented? No. What your statement of applicability must say is whether for the controls you've selected, whether they're implemented or not. If they are, it must identify where, that's your risk treatment plan. If they're not, it must identify why not and what your plan is for implementing them. So that's the answer to that. Or is evidencing progress against the baseline assessment? Yes, this is what we set out to do. This is where we're at. These are the next steps. The auditor wants to be able to rely on your management system. When they go, yes, your management system is working, they want to go, okay, I can see you have a plan. Have you got some evidence that you execute plans, or is this just something you've written? And you go, yes, we've implemented these steps. This is what's going to happen. It's booked in this person's diary. We've placed the purchase order, whatever. They want to be able to see that the plan you have is going to be implemented. And if you're doing that, then you have a management system which is capable of certification. Does the platform cater for NIST 2? Yes, it does. Yes, we are sharing the presentation. Have you ever seen a successful implementation where the company has had difficulty getting the stakeholders involved? It kind of depends on who the stakeholders are. It is a requirement that management has to be involved. So stakeholders might not be that involved if stakeholders are outside the management system, but if management is involved and management has said, whatever stakeholders say, we as management are committed, this is our policy, we put it in place, we've committed money to it, we're making it happen, then I don't expect you to have any problem getting certification. Your problem will come if management isn't really sold on the idea. If management goes, well, we understand that you need to do it, but it's very boring, so we're not taking part, and those will be major issues for you. But if management is on board, company management is on board, I don't think you would have any problem getting certified. is there a checklist of the ISO audit where you can confirm if you're ready for the audit? So the checklist really is a straightforward auditing all of the requirements of ISO 27001, so that's clauses 4 through 10, and it's auditing a selection of the controls to see if they're effective. So you simply want to, and again, if you go onto a platform like CyberComply, all of that is built in. But essentially, what you're looking at is I have a copy of ISO 27001. You need a copy of the standard if you're complying with it. Just be clear. This is what the standard says I've got to do. Am I doing all of them? Can I demonstrate? Can I find evidence somewhere that I'm doing everything that clauses 4 through 10 say I must do? And for the controls that I've selected, can I evidence the fact that they are being treated as they should be? Have I done an internal audit? Is there a management review? All of those are the kind of key elements that demonstrates the management system is actually working. Any means only. Sorry, let me go back to that question. Only 10 are IT specific. So out of the 11 controls, 11 control sets, if you have a look at them, you'll find that there is a real spread of detail. It's the themes that give you the sense of how they look. So if you look at the themes of the controls, organizational, technological, people and process, you'll see how many controls are really allocated to each of those areas, and that's probably the better place for you to go to have a look at how you might answer that that particular question. We've dealt with that. Where can you buy the new ISO 27001 2022 standard itself? I see that we've put a link to IT governance web shop in there. You can simply buy it off the web shop. It's the standard. We're a distributor for ISO, so you can buy a copy of the standard there. It's in PDF format. Can ISO 27000 audit be combined with 2790? Yes, it can be. There is no reason why not. It's simply a matter in terms of combining audits, whether it's with a 27001 or any other standard. Talk to your certification body and say, this is a surveillance visit we have, or this is a transition visit we have. We would like you also to audit our ISO 27001 2022 audit at the same time. We will be ready for it. Talk to the certification body, get their agreement. If they agree, then you can do it. It's a commercial arrangement, so talk to that very straightforwardly. How does 27001 address risks associated with modern emerging trends, e.g. AI, machine learning? What other standards can you recommend for SaaS providers based in North America apart from 27001? So yes, ISO 27001 addresses all of the potential risks because it starts with your risk assessment. It says identify for your assets what you see as being the key risks. So a platform like CyberComply, because ISO 27001 does not give you a list of vulnerabilities or threats. You go to a platform like CyberComply, that's part of its updating process. You get a library that you can choose from and drive control sets. There is a management standard recently published for governance of AI, but there's not yet a certification scheme or anything else related to that. So that's the way to think about that. You can deal with modern trends. 27001 is designed for that. There are a number of other standards, very specifically in the US. They tend to be the NIST set of standards. They're in some ways much more complicated. They tend only to be recognized in the US and by US companies, whereas ISO is recognized in the US and everywhere else. We certainly in our US business find ourselves doing ISO certifications or ISO implementations for organizations who are dealing both in the US and more broadly, because it's a standard which is internationally recognized. That's why it's called obviously an international standard. But there are NIST standards and frameworks. There are other laws in the US which are very specific. So the US has, some 18 states have their own specific information security laws. All of those can map to ISO 27001. Doesn't matter which independent certification body one certifies with. For a business with entities in the US, the UK, South Africa, no, it doesn't matter. It's a commercial arrangement for you. What you want to do is find a certification body who can meet your requirements, so they can certify in all of the jurisdictions in which you're operating. Can they demonstrate competence to do that? To an extent, that will depend on what your management system is. If you have management systems which are independent of one another, then you probably need independent certifications. If you have a single management system which works across the whole globe, you can have that management system certified just in one jurisdiction, because that's where it's based and that's where it's run out of. So putting together scope and putting together management system strategy is quite an important part of how you plan what it is that you are going to do. It's a key area we like to help clients sort out. Is the recording available for the session? I believe it usually is. How well does CyberComply and its documentation kits enable a truly integrated management system across quality, occupational health and safety, environmental, business continuity especially? So the answer to that is that's exactly what it does. So in the CyberComply platform, the document kits module has management system documents covering all of those standards, and they are designed to crosswalk so that you can create an integrated management system that references what were the Annex SL common clauses, and you can build an integrated management system which can simply subject itself to multiple audits. That's exactly what CyberComply was driven out of. We created the platform because that's what we believed managements needed to be able to do. We thought having to have standalone management systems just was expensive, gave you more problems than you needed. You wanted a single integrated management system with a single, preferably audit from a certification body, one internal audit plan, one owner of the whole management system. It's how we do things. So that's exactly what CyberComply does do. Is there closer alignment between 27001 and NIST and or SOC 2? So there's closer alignment, frankly, between 27001 and NIST because they are both requirements. They set out requirements. SOC 2 is an audit standard. It's got some principles around which audit has to be organized, but it's an audit standard that fundamentally sets out how an audit must be done. It's a SOC 2 report is fundamentally a report on how you've built a management system which has been audited following the SOC 2 methodology. So many organizations will build on the basis of NIST or ISO 27001 their management system, and at some point will add a SOC 2 audit to that because clients require it. Bear in mind that an ISO 27001 audit is way less expensive than a SOC 2 audit. A SOC 2 audit is valid for 1 year. An ISO 27001 certification is valid for 3 years. You have ongoing surveillance visits. But there is a commercial reason for talking to clients and saying, why don't you accept my ISO 27001 certification instead of a SOC 2 certification? Doesn't always work, but there's a good logical commercial reason for having that conversation. For upgrade audit check, do we have to involve all stakeholders within the organization or only IT and admin? And the answer is it depends on the scope of the management system. You're going to need to involve everybody who has a role in the management system and who will be affected by the upgrade. So anybody who's involved in the risk assessment, anybody who's going to be affected by the new controls that roll out. And I would, as a matter of course, talk to everybody inside the organization about the fact that you're upgrading the management system from 2013 to 2022, what the benefits are, how that work. I'd make that part of the internal comms, but you only need to get involved those people who have a role to play in making the transition happen. We're coming to the end of the time. What time frame do we have for the certification? Has that been a challenge to your clients also? So the time frame, as I said, is you have to transition by October 2025. We have many clients now really getting to grips with making the process work for them, getting on with doing it. The only clients that are finding it challenging are the clients who've left it with a lot of work to do ahead of the certification audits, so we're having to cram a lot of work into a very short space of time. But at the moment, it's not a problem. It will be a problem as we get closer to the transition date because there will not be an extension. You won't be able to go, okay, I didn't make it. Can I get a 6-month extension on my certificate? No, your 2013 certificate will simply have expired. Does CyberComply and document kits enable a truly integrated management system? Yes, yes, yes. So folks, I think we are, I'm afraid, out of time. We've hit 4 o'clock. So I don't have time to answer further questions. I will pick them up. We'll try and make sure we answer them and provide answers to everybody before we send the full set of slides out. Folks, I hope you found that a useful session today. I hope the webinar has been helpful for you. Please do come onto any one of our websites. We're very happy to answer questions on any one of the subjects we've had on there, and we look forward to helping you in any way we can on your ISO 27001 2022 journey. Thank you all so much for your time today. Do stay safe and secure, and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.